Thank you for tuning into our podcast, Canal Days, What Life is Like in the Industrial Connecticut River Valley of Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining us today is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Camus. He personally offers and leads public and private tours, as well as presentations of historical sites within communities throughout the state of Massachusetts. Currently, the communities he has chosen to focus on this year are Holyoke, Chicopee, South Hadley, and East Hampton, and also Granby and Amherst as well. His tours spotlight on the local canals, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks, streets, and selected historical houses within each community. In today's episode, we will be discussing the Connor Brothers Woolen Mill. So tell us of the early history of the Connor Brothers Woolen Mill.
Alright, it started off as another company besides the Connor Brothers. It was called the A.T. Stewart Mill. It started in 1864. And he would run it as also the New York Mill until the 1880s. And that's when the Connor brothers would take over. And from the early 1880s to 1901, they would run this mill. So today we're going to talk about what was made there, what production was like, and what became of the areas they were in. All right. So we we know that the Connor brothers took over and ran a great mill. A lot of stories back up that they did a great job. And they made a lot of wonderful products there. But they went out of business due to bankruptcy. Now, when bankruptcy was declared back then, and today, if anything you own that you need to survive with would not be taken away. And so they would retain their homes. They had moved out to New York City, and they were able to retain their homes, and that's great. You don't want these people living in poverty. They've done a great deal through life to get these mills and factories going, and it's good to hear that they weren't impoverished by their bankruptcy. And the person that ran it was James Connor, and when he died, some of the money went out to their wonderful three daughters.
And what was made there?
Oh, okay, lots of wonderful products. Remember, it's a wool mill, but what they made casimeres, they made overcoats, made cloaks, they made wool shoddies, which is cheaper wool, they made flocks, they made extracts of wool, they made wool waste, where you take the extra waste and maybe has the inside lining of something or of a winter jacket. They made gig, which is a different size of pile, or the size. Say you're making a jacket, if the size of the material coming above the surface was like a quarter of an inch, then that was a quarter-inch gig. But if it was 3/4 inch, you say 3/4 inch gig. And then they made sheer flocks, and they ended up having two locations within the city of Holyoke. And those two locations was right at the start of the third level canal. That was where they took over from the New York Woolen Mill in the 1880s. But that was their second location. Their first location was right behind the Skinner Mill, maybe 100 yards towards the south of the Skinner Mill, pressed right against the first level canal. So they were using the first and second level canals for water. And sure, that was important because they were there a long time, even before there was electricity. But you asked, what did they make? And I think the coolest product they made was Connor Brothers Satinette. Very, very smooth satin.
And real quick, before we continue with our interview, just to fill our listeners in, to find out more information, or if you're interested in signing up for any of his various tours, check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there you can find videos and podcasts of the stops along each of his tours, as well as photos and text of the historical sites as well. And for private tours and other inquiries, you can email him directly at bobcat4214B@yahoo.com. And his tours make for fun, educational, outdoor activities for families and group parties. So getting back to our interview, what was production like?
Okay, every floor and every section, every building had a different job to it. And so I'll describe some of what they did. In their building A, that was a storage in the attic and also storage, and they had cart in there where they would get the little pieces of bunched up material that didn't make the material smooth. They get those out there. And also, they would make sure there was no dust or stray pieces on the material itself. Very, very important to have it smooth. Everything was smooth in these factories. Okay, now I can't find a B section, but in C section, that was a shoddy mill, and that's where you used not very good wool to make certainly inferior products, but it's still very important because there's a lot of poor people across the country, and you wanted to have different quality of products. And that's what the shoddy mill did. And plant number D, or letter D, they had the coal, and they also had the power plant from the canals, so they generated lots of power in that section. And section E was also the engine room from the canal. And from there, they had to reach with belts and gears right into the main mills. And they had two power sections, and so this was one of them. And section F, they had the picker house. That's where the people would pick through the material, the wool that they were given, and take out the best quality, the inferior quality, the middle quality, and put them in different bins and bring them over the section they needed. In letter G, there was a dye house, get their correct color on there. And section E was the washroom. After it was ready, you want to wash it down and make sure it was all clean. And section E was mostly administration. Section I. In section J, this was on three different floors plus an attic. In the attic, they had the spinning of the wool. In section 4.3, they had the carded room where they'd go through it again and pick out the little impurities. In section 2, the very important weaving room. And in section 1, they had the finishing. All right, so that was J. In K was another administration area, and that was that. Very sophisticated production.
And what became of the area?
Okay, the area we're just mostly talking about, the area near the Skinner Mill, was never taken up again except by Farapaka. And they extended way beyond that city block to many other institutions. And also the other area they took over, the New York Mill, would later become the Holyoke Plush Company, and then would later be abandoned, and there's nothing there at all either. So you can't find much evidence of this wonderful Connor Brothers warehouse or mills, but they had a great influence, and they were beloved around the city for being good employers.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours and historical topics of your expertise. And of course, we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And check out a large selection of our other podcasts at his website, as well as on SoundCloud.com. And be sure to stay up to date with new podcasts and videos posted daily. Thank you, and hope you join us again.